All right, Tiki Tierney back here on CBS Sports Radio. John Rothstein still in the studio. John, CBS Sports College Basketball Insider, who writes for FanRag.com as well. Let's get to a quick coaching nugget or two. Indiana never even looked like it got very far with Steve Alford. Behind the scenes, what was happening?
Buyout's a big deal. We went through the financials last week. Indiana's going to pay Tom Crean $4 million not to coach next season.
Wow.
Steve Alford's buyout at UCLA is $7.8 million. If UCLA did not move on the buyout, that means that is $11.8 million before you pay a head coach, probably in the neighborhood of $4 million a year. That's close to $16 million.
What's next for Crean?
Great question, Brandon. You know, Tom Crean, I don't think, is wired to sit out and obviously be in a situation where he's going to bounce around and take in practices. So I'm sure that he is monitoring every situation. But from the people close to him, I don't think Tom is going to take any job.
What about Georgetown?
Georgetown is a unique situation. Now, one of the things that I can tell you, I know we spoke a lot late last week about Tommy Amaker and, you know, his potential interest. You know, I know that talking to people close to Tommy that, you know, he has always been enamored with the Georgetown brand, but he would obviously do a lot of research in finding if the brand could get its cachet back before he would explore potentially taking the job. But obviously Coach Amaker is very committed to Harvard, so it would take obviously complete certainty on his part to know that he could get Georgetown back to what it was 3 decades ago before he ever even entertained taking the job.
Yeah. Wow.
So that is the research that he is gathering right now.
I mean, that tells you all you need to know about Georgetown. When the coach is doing the research on you, of course, they do the research on him, but you just look at his resume and you know the research. But wow, that's kind of an indictment.
And
And
it doesn't stand alone. Georgetown should be, you would think, but they're not anymore. At least from a perspective of a coach.
All right.
That's a little crazy.
Speaking of coaches, John, Mark Few. We tend to illuminate all the shortcomings, whether it's Billy Self front and foremost here, a little bit of Calipari as well, despite great achievements for both, but you know, losing on the big stage when they do. And we kind of tend to gloss over the really good stuff. What makes Mark Few special?
As comfortable in his own skin as any coach that I've ever covered, understands the big picture, doesn't get too wired in college basketball. Like, he obviously wants to make a point to balance college basketball and family, will rearrange practice if one of his assistant's kids has soccer practice or something like that, has no problem leaving his phone in his house and going fishing and, you know, kind of like just shutting down and being able to unwind, and just tries not to overthink it, and understands that obviously now it's obviously easier to say this than ever, but understands that he has a chance to compete for a national championship and doesn't have to go to a higher program. Like, why would he give up that quality of life?
I'm not even going to ask you that question. I believe he's a Gonzaga lifer. Yeah, a couple of years ago we were I'm with you. But the funny thing is the way you described his approach, that could also be construed as lazy if you don't win. Well, I'm going to rearrange practice. I'm going to go fishing. I'm going to go hunt. I think it's great. I think it's a very admirable trait. But if it doesn't work out, and I don't mean for him because clearly it has, but if you know what I'm saying, it's kind of a unique way to approach a job.
It's like the big time coach. I don't know, profile.
Well, no question. But think about this. This is an interesting question to pose to people right now. What's more impressive? The fact that Mark Few got Gonzaga to a Final Four, or the fact that Mark Few has been to 18 straight NCAA tournaments and has never missed the tournament since he's been a Division I head coach?
Yeah,
I think
even back when they were still considered.
I still think it's the former.
Okay.
I do. I mean, personally, there's no right or wrong answer. I just think of the conference he's played.
Yeah.
You know, I know St. Mary's is good. Periodically, a few other teams emerge. I get it. But to really crack through and take Gonzaga to a Final Four, and I'm not trying to minimize all the 18 straight bids, but I'm so happy for him, I guess is what I'm saying, because there's a validation that comes with that, and he's earned it.
No, he's definitely earned that. But I think, you know, also, too, the interesting thing is we're talking about Gonzaga like they're a mid-major. I firmly believe
we don't do that anymore.
No, I mean, no, but people are going to the Final Four saying, well, Gonzaga's never been there. If you watch them play and you look at their personnel this year more than any other year, this is far from a mid-major.
Yeah, it's
been like that for years.
It's similar to Greg Marshall and Wichita State. They're not really a mid-major, even though they technically are, or at least they play in a mid-major conference. They're not a mid-major.
John Rothstein is with us here. He's in studio, which is always cool. Good friend of the show. John with CBS Sports, of course, part of the family. He's an insider, college hoops and he writes for fanrag.com, the Rothstein Files.
Now, a lot of the
got his red tie in the picture.
A lot of the belief in Gonzaga was, I don't know, it was always water thrown on it or warm water, cold water thrown on it because of who they played. And save for that one loss against BYU, which was, just a fluke. This team should be undefeated. What makes the team so good, personnel-wise?
Well, Tiki, I think that the best thing that ever happened to Gonzaga was losing that game against BYU because, as difficult as it is to be a Gonzaga team that's going to the NCAA tournament as a 1 seed and a team that's never made the Final Four, it would have been more difficult if the team was undefeated. That was an elephant in the room that never got through the door. Can you imagine if Gonzaga was undefeated at this point to talk about Gonzaga being 37-0 going into the Final Four? That would be a completely different entity that would add to everything. We're not even talking about that. People are talking about Gonzaga as Gonzaga making the Final Four. Nobody's talking about the fact that Gonzaga made the Final Four and they're 36-1.
Yeah, no, you're right. Now the matchup is against South Carolina. Now I can't think of a brighter contrast in coaching styles from Few and the Maniac and Frank Martin on the other side. Obviously, South Carolina. I mean, nobody thought about South Carolina's basketball program being here.
Nobody.
I mean, how did he get it here? One, how did he get here? Because we know his path was high school coach. No one would give him a shot. He finally gets on a staff with Bobby Huggins, and before you know it, he has his opportunity, and 5 years later, South Carolina's a player.
Well, think about how fortunate, some people are in their life. It's right place, right time. Frank Martin was fortunate enough to become a part of Bob Huggins' tree. Bob Huggins went to Kansas State for a year, recruited a guy by the name of Michael Beasley, who made, obviously, Kansas State nationally relevant about 10 years ago. And at the time, there was only one job that Bob Huggins would have left Kansas State for, West Virginia. So Bob Huggins leaves West Virginia, and Kansas State wants to keep Michael Beasley committed. So what do? They have to keep it in-house with the staff that recruited him. So they decide to promote Frank Martin, and the rest is history. Frank has done an unbelievable job, and he's taken 2 schools right now deep into the NCAA tournament. Kansas State and South Carolina, neither is known for men's basketball.
He's a coach, bottom line. I know you don't get too much into the NBA projections. You've always been fully forthright. You're into the college game, even though you know the NBA. You stick in your lane, and I hear you. But watching Alonzo Ball the other night seemed tentative, and I know you've watched him all year, just reluctant to do what he usually does. It's just a guess, but any chance the whole story of what his dad has said, you think it's seeped into – do you see difference in body language, I guess is what I'm getting at?
I'm not going to put a lot of stock into one game. And I think that's sometimes that, it's our society, we have knee-jerk reactions. And Lonzo Ball did not play his best basketball in the Sweet 16. There's no doubt about that. But, probably if in an 82-game season, you might have 10 or 12 nights like that. Mm-hmm. So if this happens, and it just so happens on a bigger stage when his counterpart, De'Aaron Fox, had his best game of the season, 39. And it was a national scale. But, it's the same thing when you're dealing with a one-game tournament. Crazy things happen. And I go back to what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, with Villanova. Is Jay Wright any different of a coach than he was last year? Because Josh Hart's, play against Wisconsin didn't work out the way it did last year with Chris Jenkins. It's the same thing with players. If you've watched Lonzo Ball 25, 30 times, you know that he is a transcendent type talent.
I'm not saying he's not. I'm not saying he's not. I'm not saying I would take him first. I would take him first overall. But the difference for me is, it's one thing if the shots aren't dropping. It's one thing if you're trying to overcreate and you wind up with 8 or 9 turnovers. A statistical anomaly. What struck me as odd is that he wasn't very engaged. Mm-hmm. He seemed disconnected. And I have not watched him 25 times this year, but I've watched him 12 or 13, and I haven't seen that.
And then right after the game, he announces he's gone. He's gone.
Well, we knew that was happening.
I know that.
It just seemed...
but why would you do it right? You don't need to do it right then.
I guess.
Type of thing. I don't know. I mean...
I hear it. No, he did not have his best
game. It just creates a question that doesn't need to be asked about him because he's a great college player.
He is. All right, Johnny boy. So you're scooting out on Wednesday, right?
Wednesday.
You excited? By the way, was the first – I'm trying to think. I know you and I were at Final Fours together. What was your first Final Four?
2007.
San Antonio? Or was that the year after that?
It was Atlanta. San Antonio was 2008.
Okay, there you go. All right, man. Look, the years are piling up, John.
Yeah.
Hair's still looking good, though. By the way, what was Wally wearing on TV yesterday with that ridiculous red outfit?
Oh.
Did he lose the
Ranger? What was going on?
Did he lose the bet?
Super fans, super fans. They were dressed up.
There you go. John, great job all year.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
You got it, brother. Keep breaking stories. Fanrag.com. John Rothstein, College Hoops Insider, CBS Sports.